Welcome back to another New York Giants video, and today Joe Schoen was officially announced as the New York Giants head coach, and he did have his first press conference at 11:45 a.m. And there was a lot of good stuff that came out today. Him only being 42 years old and coming out of Buffalo as assistant GM, he had some great things to say, and he had a couple things to say about current Giants players, Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley. He also gave a brief plan, a brief blueprint of how he wants to approach things in the near future, and also looking long term and obviously looking to compete for a championship. So, if you watched the press conference, you kind of saw that he was a little bit nervous. Not everyone's a great public speaker, but you saw Joe Judge, who was a great public speaker. He got himself fired at the end of the season, and his speaking ability is the thing that got him fired, and that's what a lot of fans early on caught on to, and they were like, this he knows what he's talking about, but he really didn't. It was just coach speak, and it was just him trying to say the right things. But Joe Schoen, it seems like he knows, he knows what he's talking about as well, and he seems like a really humble guy. A guy who doesn't have a big ego. This was a problem with the previous GM, Dave Gettleman. It felt like a lot of people, came out and said that he felt like he had to do things his way, and he didn't really listen to the scouting department and all and the entire staff. So, and only did what he wanted to do. But it seems like Joe Schoen is a guy who's understanding. He's a guy who's going to listen. He's a guy who understands, because he was a former player as well, but he's been in the business for a really long time. He said himself that coming out of college the week after, he was already in the NFL. So, this guy seems like he's good, but I'm not going to get my expectations up too early, because we've done that before as Giants fans. We've did the same thing with Joe Judge and maybe even Dave Gettleman, but you want to keep your expectations to the minimum and just hope for the best. With that being said, let's get into some of the quotes that came out of today's presser. The first one that I want to bring up is Joe Schoen said he's a true believer in giving an opportunity to everyone on the current Giants staff. He said there are a lot of good people in the building. He's looking forward to working with everyone. Will be evaluated. I'll keep that up for you guys. I think the reason I brought this up first is because we're really nearing the end of the head coaching search. And a guy who's going to be interviewed is Patrick Graham. He's already on the staff. He's still on contract, so he's obviously welcome to go elsewhere as well, interviews and stuff like that. But he's still on the Giants. He still has the DC job, technically, but interviewing for the head coaching job. And also, if we bring in a different head coach and they want to keep Graham as the DC, that seems like a possibility now. It always did, but now with Schoen coming out and saying that he's willing to give everyone an opportunity, it's really possible Graham is back, and that would be amazing, because this team and these players already on the Giants has fallen in love with Patrick Graham, and his defense is amazing. We didn't have much talent on the Giants defense 2 years ago, and we were top 10. And he finds ways to minimize the weaknesses and maximize the strengths. So it would be great to get Patrick Graham back. The next one I wanted to bring up was this. Joe Schoen said he'll be given every resource possible by ownership to build the team into a winner. To me, this is really important, because Dave Gettleman, being an established guy in the league before he was hired, and having previous GM experience, he was handicapped. So, you think of Joe Schoen, who's only 42, first GM gig, you'd think ownership would kind of, baby him a little bit, try to steer him in the direction they want him to go in. But it seems like that's not the case, and that's great. Just let him do his job. This is the reason you brought him in. This is the reason why you go through the entire GM search, to bring in the guy you feel like will be able to single-handedly, just lead the ship and, take the advice of the people under him and, just bring us to what we want to be, which is a Super Bowl contending team. So this is just great news. They came before we even had Joe Schoen being announced the GM. There was stuff coming out that the new GM is going to have full control, which is, it seems like it's still holding true. Hopefully with the new head coach, that's also true. But As of right now, it seems like John Mara's learned that he can't completely control everything in the building. You just have to let these guys that you pay and hire to do what they're supposed to. The next quote I want to bring up is this. Joe Schoen on the Giants salary cap mess. It's a concern and it's real. There are going to be difficult decisions that have to be made. He said we will sit down next week with Kevin Abrams, still technically the assistant GM, to formulate a plan. So it seems like Kevin Abrams still on the team, still part of the front office, still handling the cap of the New York Giants. I think it's great that he recognizes this problem, and this is one of his priorities. Getting this straight before free agency and the draft, because if you don't, then you're in a bigger mess, because then you have you don't have to, but you're most likely going to want to sign free agents even if they're not big name guys, and you're obviously the draft where we have so many high draft picks where they're going to cost a good amount, so you're going to have to clear this up, figure a way to get over the cap in terms of over that minimum or where you're supposed to be, but he was harping on this entire presser. It seems like this is really his priority, and even though he's a scout, or that's his background, he's definitely had some background in the handling the cap with Brandon Beane, because he said himself, even though he had that background of scouting, Brandon Beane and him were the only two really the only two guys in Buffalo when they were hired, and they really had to manage everything on their own, and they had to they had to build the entire staff, they had to learn everything themselves. And Brandon Beane, who was less of a scout and more of the football operations guy, he really topped Joe Schoen, according to Joe Schoen. So it seems like we will be in good hands, and if Kevin Abrams is still on the team until at least the draft, that I think honestly could play to an advantage, because Kevin Abrams knows inside and out of the cap situation, and even though he might not be the best guy, he still knows his stuff. That's why he's in the NFL. That's why he's been retained for this long. So I think they'll work together, they'll figure it out, but it seems it's good that they recognize the bigger issues here. The next thing I want to bring up it's about Daniel Jones. This was probably one of my favorite quotes. This wasn't in his presser. It was after Ralph Macchiano interviewed or had him on the side and they were talking. So this was probably one of my favorite quotes. If you want to see Daniel Jones put his best foot forward, he's got to stay on his feet. If you want to see what Saquon can do, it would be nice if we could block guys. And him coming in, him being an outsider, him realizing that the offensive line is a huge issue for this team. It's really holding guys back like Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, and you're not really able to evaluate these guys and make a decision on them, because if they're not able to produce or they're being held back by the offensive line, how can you evaluate them? Because they're in this situation here, and if they're with a different team going forward, they could take off in their careers if they're put in the right situation. So I think he realizes that. I think he realizes these guys haven't just fall off completely from the rookie seasons. I think he realizes that, these guys have talent, and in order for them to have success in the league, have success with the Giants, they're going to have to build this thing the right way, and that's going to begin with the offensive line. Dave Gettleman, Joe Judge have ignored that part of the team for such a long time. And it feels like the entire Giants for the last couple of years and even, I guess you could go back to the Super Bowl after that, the offensive line has really been ignored. We tried to address it, but the pieces haven't worked that we brought in. So, hopefully Joe Schoen, Dave Gettleman came out in press conferences and said that he was going to fix it. Joe Schoen does the same thing. Hopefully this time it works. If it doesn't, that's going to be a huge issue going forward. The next thing is Joe Schoen on his team building process. I think you can compete today and still build for tomorrow. This sounds really similar to rebuilding and trying to win at the same time, but I think it's not. I think what he's trying to say is, we'll bring in the guys because you still, at the end of the day, you still have to play football games. You still have to compete every single Sunday, even though you're in the rebuilding process. So he's going to bring the guys that are going to help us. And hopefully those guys are foundation pieces and they're going to be talented players and not just guys that you bring in short term. So bringing in those type of guys are going to help. It's going to help you compete in the present, and it's also going to and those same players are going to help you compete in the future. With Dave Gettleman, it was more like, all right, we'll bring in a couple young guys through the draft and maybe free agency, but we'll also bombard the team with these veterans who are going to pay a lot, and that didn't really work because those veterans were going to be gone. They're from the team, their contracts are going to be up, and maybe they retire and after a season or two. But with Joe Schoen, hopefully he brings in these young guys that can help us now and also help us when we're really competing for Super Bowl, like guys like Andrew Thomas, Xavier McKinney, Azeez Ojulari, guys like that. If you fill your teams with those, you're really looking good for the future. You just don't want a couple guys here and there. You want to fill your team with guys like that. The next thing is, Joe Schoen said the next Giants coach doesn't have to have previous head coaching experience. He's looking for someone who is in lockstep with him and is aligned with my vision. So, obviously the first name that comes to your mind is Brian Daboll. Has connections with him, probably shares the same vision since they're both from Buffalo, but does not have previous head coaching experience. Then you see a guy like Brian Flores, who's from Miami, doesn't really have a connection to Joe Schoen, but has previous head coaching experience and has success in the league. And also Dan Quinn, you can mention him, who's had he had some success with Atlanta, and now with Dallas, he's really taken off with that defense. So it seems like they're totally open to anything right now. Doesn't matter if it's a first-time head coach or if he's had experience or if he's a Super Bowl winning champion or having a 5-2 record or like a 5-11 record or whatever. So it seems like they're really open to it, and they're really doing their due diligence on all of these guys, and not just bringing in the guy that they feel like has a connection to them in the past or whatever. So this is great stuff, honestly. And then the next thing is, once the new staff gets in here, head coach, offensive coordinator, entire staff, we're going to dive into the film and look at what allows Daniel to put his best foot forward. Shane said during his introductory press conference, he's a great kid. Obviously, we know this. Daniel Jones, he's a great guy. From everything that comes out, he's a hard worker. He really wants to win and really cares about the game and has passion. We all know that. It's nothing new. It's something that a good amount of quarterbacks have nowadays and always had, but what really matters is the production. If you can't produce, it doesn't matter what type of person you are, it's a business, it's a production league, and if you don't produce, you're out. So Daniel Jones honestly hasn't had a great supporting cast within the last 3 years, but Joe Schoen realizes that, and he said before, obviously with the offensive line quote, that he's going to try to build a team around Daniel Jones and try to, give him everything that he needs to succeed. If he can't produce, then he's probably gone. He didn't say that, but that you could interpret that from obviously just in how the league works. And I think this can be with a lot of players. The key guys or the guys or the younger type of younger guys. You're not really going to see getting cut this offseason, even though we need the cap. They're going to evaluate these guys, give them a fair shot with the Giants. If they can't do anything, then they're probably going to be gone. The next thing I want to bring up is this. When he came out, he was a rare talent. I know he's had some injuries, and that comes with the position. We've talked a little bit about where we may need to upgrade. I think if we upgrade the offensive line, that's going to help Daniel Jones, and it's going to help Saquon. He was talking about Saquon. He was a rare talent, generational back. Injuries have plagued his career, but if given offensive line, can he succeed? And according to Joe Schoen, he can, and it's obviously logical to think he will. But his contract is coming up, so if he's gonna succeed, if he's gonna have success with the Giants, or he's gonna prove himself, it's gonna have to be this season. If not, he can be gone, and as much as that hurts, it's probably best for the team. But if he can become a great player like he was his rookie season, I don't see why you don't extend him, especially if you can figure out a way to manipulate the cap and work around it and hopefully get it in the direction you want it to going forward. And the next thing I want to bring up is not about Joe Schoen, but John Mara and Deshaun Watson. We're not trading for Deshaun Watson. point blank. That's all he had to say. Not really, but that they can't get more clear than that. And he gives his reasoning, saying that there are so many reasons why we shouldn't do that, cap wise. Obviously, he brings it up to realizes it's a major issue. And then he goes on to say we couldn't afford it, but more importantly, with the allegations that are out there right now, that's just not the right fit for us. John Mara, he reached out to Brian Flores himself, so I felt like maybe he felt Brian Flores has the right vision, but obviously we know Brian Flores wants to bring in Deshaun Watson. Obviously, Brian Flores can still be hired because he's a New York native. He definitely wants to work here. But Deshaun Watson's probably not going to happen. This is not one of those things where it's smoke, where you try to make it seem like you're not doing something. But when the owner comes out and says that we're not doing something, it most likely means we're not doing that. And he definitely has reasons for it, and they're pretty valid. Honestly, I didn't want to trade for Deshaun Watson. If you saw my video, you know that. But recently, I have been more open to it. I felt like if we get the right deal for him, not giving up both our first round picks, and maybe if we get rid of some contracts with it, it could be a great situation. And if his allegation stuff is all sorted out, it could work out for us. But with John Mara coming out, I don't feel it's going to happen anymore, even if we get Brian Flores. So, it seems like Joe Schoen, he has the right mindset. He has the right attitude towards things. And I feel like he's a great person overall. We don't know him personally. We can't really say anything about that. But from everything that's out there, it seems like he does know what he's doing. Honestly, with such a short time between now and the draft and free agency, it's really going to be hard to judge these guys off of 1 year. When you're a GM inheriting a terrible situation like you are with the Giants, you're going to want to try to give them a longer leash, because with Dave Gettleman, when he took over, we gave him 4 years, almost 5. So you want to try to evaluate these guys just like you evaluate players. It's not going to happen overnight. He said it himself. With Buffalo, they were 9-7 and 6-10 the year after. So it's a process. It takes time. And this job is no different with the New York Giants. We haven't had success overnight. Hell, we haven't had success in 5, 6, 7 years. So it's definitely something that's going to take time. We're going to have to be patient, as much as we hate to say that, and we've been being patient for the last couple of years. But when we wanted head coaches and our GM fired last year, and this was definitely something that was needed, but with that comes a new regime coming in, them starting from ground zero. That means them evaluating the entire roster, them not having a set plan yet. They're going to develop something, and obviously as things go along, they're going to have to make changes to everything and hopefully get us in the right direction. So I think that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you liked it. So please subscribe, turn on the bell notification, and comment something. There's a lot of stuff going on. So if you have any thoughts, just let me know.